Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work as a school-based counselor at a school in Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good afternoon, friends. I refer to us as our listening family, especially those who never miss an episode, but I do it for a reason. It's because we all support each other in achieving our goal of making college knowledge available to all, which is our mission, by the way, to make college knowledge available to all. And I think that was really demonstrated this week through a couple different ways, which I'm going to share with you. So I had something completely different that I had planned to share before we get into our interview. But two listeners in our listening family reached out to me this week and shared something, and I was like, snap, this is really important. So the first one, I was talking to her, it was a mom, and I said, I'm calling an audible, and I'm sharing this week on Monday's episode. So I said, I'm going to jettison my content. It's all good. I can get back to what I was going to share the next week. And then 2 days later, I hear from a dad, regular member of the listening family. He shares the exact same thing, and I tell him the same thing. I'm talking about this on Monday's episode. So by now you're wondering, what are you talking about? Well, if you're a regular listener, you've heard me talk about a few things. You've heard us talk about how there's so much talk about the sweatshirt schools, the one percenters, the reach for alls in the media, that it literally has kids stressed out about whether they're going to get shut out, whether they're getting in any college. You've heard us talk about the value of getting a few early acceptances just to relieve the stress. Sometimes you can do that through rolling admissions. Rolling admission schools, as applications rolling in, decisions rolling out, you can get a decision even in the month of August. And the value of just reducing that stress. The other thing you've heard us talk about is the rise of direct admission. In fact, Lisa even did a whole interview with Jeremy Lowe, VP of Enrollment at American University, on direct admission. We've talked about it frequently. In fact, when I got back from the NACAC conference in 2022 in Houston, I talked about how Angel Perez said that in the next 10 years, he could see direct admissions taking over and being the predominant way that colleges do admissions. Now, I said I was skeptical it would happen in the first 10 years, but boy, is it potentially on pace to prove him right. And you've heard us talk about multiple different organizations that do direct admissions, the big push that the Common App is making for direct admissions, and EAB through their college greenlight offering, and niche.com. Those are a few we've talked about before on the podcast. Well, today I'm going to share how two of our listeners use Niche's direct admission to get some early acceptances, I'm talking August, with scholarships under their belt. And how they both said to me, does it ever take the pressure off? Does it ever relieve stress? I'm going to talk about how you can do that. Early, August, months before you've even applied to early action or early decision schools. But before we get to that, I do have a few announcements. First of all, once again, I think this is a celebration episode. The more I think about it, literally every segment comes back to you, our listeners. Special thanks to everyone who made a contribution either in the last month or since 2018 when we started. We said we're going to be a community. We'll fund it through crowdfunding and we'll have no commercials. Well, you should get an email starting tomorrow if you've ever given a gift. And if you don't get it, please reach out. We think we've double checked and have every email accurately. We'd love for you to tell us the state that you're in. A couple of weeks ago, I said there are like 31 people on our website under our donors, and we have no state attached to them. I think that number is over 40 now. But you should get an email tomorrow, come through MailChimp, and it's a 39-minute audio file with tips on how to do the personal statement. You should get another one Monday the 19th and the final one Monday the 26th, and they're all right between 35 to 40 minutes. So please let us know if you do not get that. And also please let us know if we can move you from state unknown and put your name into the proper state. So that's a special thanks to our listeners. That's why this is the celebration of our listeners episode. Next, we have 5 events on our event page, and I want to let you know about them. And once again, this is just more shout outs to our listeners. Why? I mentioned I was coming to California and people came out of the woodwork and said, I'd love to host an event. It just grew organically. So we have 2 Your College Bound Kid receptions in San Diego, back-to-back days, one on the 11th, one on the 12th. You're like, why do you have 2 back-to-back at the same place? Well, we found out that a pretty sizable group is coming to one of them, and I wanted to make sure there was space for people beyond just that group and a few others. And also, Sylvia, who's one of our co-hosts in a rotation, Sylvia Borgo, has agreed to host. She's a counselor in the area. And so shout out to Sylvia, but also shout out to Stacy Boudman, who's also a college counselor in the area. And she reached out and agreed to host. So we got 2 college counselors, faithful listeners. They're hosting events for us to meet our listeners, which we're really excited about. And then on the 19th of September, we're going to be at Redwood City for a reception. Now, I'm the only one who can make that event, but I'd still love to meet anybody in the Bay Area or anyone in Northern California or anybody who doesn't mind a little bit of a drive. Redwood City is halfway between San Francisco and San Jose. Special thanks to Eunice Choi, a dedicated parent who's agreed to host, and she secured a law firm where we can meet. And then on the 22nd of September, our Santa Monica reception. And by the way, all of these are now up and accurate, and I know because people have signed up for them. So that's the only way I never know that something will work because I'm just so technically incompetent. But special shout out to Leanne Premiana. She has agreed to host this event in Santa Monica. I'm excited about it so we can reach the greater LA area on September 22nd. The events are different lengths of time. Some of them are just mingling, social, interaction. Some of them have a little bit of a presentation Q&A. They're all a little bit different, but some of those details are up on our website. We just hope to see you there. And if you heard Thursday's episode, I'm doing a deep dive with Carlin Green, a.k.a. the Scholarship Guru, on how to win outside or external scholarships. She's also doing a webinar for us on Tuesday, October 8th, 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central, 6:30 Mountain, 5:30 Pacific. That sign up is there. So we got 5 events on our event page. If you're in California, we'd love to see you. And if not, hope to see you at the scholarship event. And we just put our settings in place. I didn't say we as in Linda, because I'm technically incompetent. So from now on, all webinars are automatically recorded and you'll automatically get reminders. So we're still flying by the seat of our pants. We've only had this Zoom webinar subscription ever since Linda and Lisa did their presentation. So 3 months ago, maybe. So we're still learning as we go, but we're getting better. Be patient with us. All right, let's dive in. Let's talk about how to relieve stress by getting some early acceptances through direct admission through niche.com. All right, so I don't want to assume that you heard our conversations about direct admission. One of the things I try to do on this podcast, and it's a challenge, but I think I pull it off most of the time, although you're the jury, not me. I want someone, and we have listeners like this, by the way, who have been in the business since the 70s. I want someone who's been doing this 45 plus years to listen to every single episode and say, I learned something every single time. However, I also want the neophyte, the newbie, the brand new person who's maybe just came over from another country and doesn't really know anything about the U.S. system. I hope that we can put the cookies on the shelf low enough so that we're not going over their head. So with that in mind, I don't want to assume that people heard past conversations about direct admissions. So let's talk about what it is. Well, with direct admissions, you get accepted to colleges, oftentimes with scholarships. Here's the key word, without even applying. And I know some of you are wondering, how can you get accepted without even applying? Well, I'm going to explain it, but there are several people out there doing this. EAB, the big enrollment management company that we talked about over the last few weeks, and we're fairly critical of, but want to say something complimentary of them here. They've got a plan through their college greenlight option, and they often call it flipped admissions. Flipped admissions, which I actually like that name. It's flipped because it's reversed. Instead of you applying to the colleges, you just go on, complete a portal, and the colleges reach out to you that want you to come to them. They accept the students they want. No applications. No time involved in that. No rejection. Fill out the information. If they want you, they let you know. Less stress, more peace of mind, less time, can be very appealing. Now, I do want to have a few caveats. Most of the colleges, especially most of the very selective colleges, are not participating. Okay? But more schools are at it all the time. And in EAB's program, an organization as distinguished as the University of Rochester is in their mix. But EAB College Greenlight's a little different. They really target first-gen under-resourced students. Niche.com provides direct admission to all students, irrespective of income, as long as you are a U.S. resident. So how does it work? Well, you simply go to niche.com, sign up for an account, username and password, and Niche claims that they are the only direct admission program with no application, no waiting period. Once again, you just need to be a U.S. citizen. And then this is very important. I'm going to say a little bit more about this in a second. You do need to set your contact preferences up so that colleges can contact you. Very important. I'm going to repeat that. You do need to set your contact preferences up so that colleges can contact you. So here's how Niche describes it. We simplify the college admission process. High school seniors can get accepted to participating colleges and get scholarships based on their niche profile alone. And there are 3 steps to the Niche direct admission program. First, register. And then, like I said, set up your contact preferences. Okay, this means filling out a profile, and it also means keeping it up to date. And of course, as I mentioned, make sure your contact settings are set up to receive acceptances. Second, add a direct admission school to your list. So you get to create little lists in Niche. Add them to your list. When you're on your profile, click the Add to the List button, and you'll see that at the top of the page. And if a direct admission school is already on your list before, let's say you had a profile before, then you can log in and you could see that you're accepted. And you can see the financial award if you're eligible for one. And then the next thing is check your dashboard. So this is where you'll see the acceptances. The acceptances appear in the dashboard, and they appear in real time as long as you meet the school's criteria. It's very important that you regularly update your profile. And also, it's important that you check back from time to time because they're always recruiting more and more colleges. Like, I look at the list of colleges that are now participating. It's way longer than the last time I checked. So they've got a pretty talented team over there, and they're always doing something creative. And so now they've added a bunch more schools to the list. Now, here's a few things that you should know. You're like, how in the world can they do this? Doesn't make any sense. Do you know 60% of colleges accept more than 8 out of 10 kids? You'd never know that if you listen to the media. 60% of colleges accept more than 8 out of 10 kids. You're saying, well, these scholarships like $250. No, a lot of them can be 15 grand or more. Now, I do want to share one caveat. We've done a lot of deep dives and episodes on search or student search, mostly in the context of the College Board and the ACT, right? So this is where, usually when you're doing an AP exam, or PSAT or PACT, There's a little questionnaire, and then you fill it out, and it says, is it okay if colleges contact you? And then you have to put in some information in there, like your attended major, self-reported GPA. Obviously, they have your location, they'll have your test scores, gender, and things like that. And then colleges build a whole search campaign, a whole funnel off that, right? They pay a little more than 50 cents a name to target you by email and snail mail. That's why you wonder, why am I getting all this mail? Because that's how they get access to the whole country. Well, especially when the pandemic came, but even before the pandemic, other competitors rose up besides the ACT and the College Board. And they're also replicating the same thing as part of their financial model, which is sell lists of names to schools so that they can put you in their admissions funnel and target you. So I do want to let you know that Niche does do that. So Niche, if you have a major problem with that, maybe this isn't for you, but most people are like, you know what? I'm curious, like to see what schools I get in without any work at all and maybe get a $50,000 more scholarship. I'll be okay with them selling my name. But I just thought I should let you know that they're trying to really cut into Encora, which is who ACT uses, and College Board for the SAT, and trying to cut into their market share. And there's some other players in the game as well, but Niche is one of the bigger third-party players out there in the student search name listing, name selling business. So I do want to let you know that. All right. So when you go in, you can see like all the direct admissions colleges are listed. And there's a few next steps, and they do vary for each school. So, a very common one is you have to confirm your information. Some schools will ask for an official transcript. And once the college confirms, you just submit your deposit and you enroll. It's really that simple. If you go into your Niche dashboard, you can see your acceptances, but they also may email them to you as well. Some schools will choose to email. Some will just keep them in the dashboard, but most do both email and the dashboard. Now, if you're not interested, you should just remove the acceptance. That's a courtesy to the school. It's kind of a pet peeve when I was in admissions, when you work really, really hard to get a kid and then they just ghost you. And it happens to everybody. I've heard Lee Coffin at Dartmouth say that. It's one of his pet peeves. Like, just do a basic courtesy and just say thanks, but no thanks. So even that this is a portal system, I still would encourage you, if you go through this process, you match with the school and you're not interested, just give them a courtesy, clicking a button and letting them know that you're not interested. If you have a change in your profile at all in any way, then you should also let schools know by just going in and editing your profile. You see like a pencil icon. You just use that pencil icon, go in and make edits on your profile. All right, so I thought I would share with you the colleges that are currently in the Niche direct admit match system, just to kind of get a feel for some of them. Some of them you will have heard of, some you will not have heard of, but this list keeps growing and growing all the time. A couple of them on here we've done college spotlights on. All right, so I'm just going to fly through this list super, super fast just to give you a feel. So University of Nevada, Portland State, North Dakota State, Stockton, University of Wyoming, Long Island University, Missouri University, Science and Technology, University of New Haven, Purdue Fort Wayne, Northwest Missouri State, University of Missouri at St. Louis, Roger Williams, University of the Pacific, Florida Institute of Technology, York College, University of La Verne, Drake, Wingard, Tulsa, Truman State, Western New England, Bellarmine in Louisville, Houston Christian, Oregon Institute of Technology, Bethel and St. Paul, Nazareth, St. Thomas Aquinas, Moravian, Mount St. Mary's in Maryland, St. Norbert, and then we have Arcadia, St. Catherine's, quite a few Minnesota schools in here, Tiffin in Ohio, Caldwell, New Jersey, Illinois Wesleyan, Bloomington University, St. Francis in Indiana, Baker College in Michigan, Hardin-Simmons, Abilene, Texas, Washington and Jefferson. It's one we've done a spotlight on in Pennsylvania. University of Maine, Farmington, Lubbock Christian in Lubbock, Texas, Mount St. Mary's, Gwinnett Mercy in PA, Spartanburg Methodist, South Carolina, New York Film Academy, Covenant College, Lookout Mountain, Georgia, Whittier, done a spotlight on them, just outside of LA, Menlo College, California, Bay Path University, Heston, Capital Technology, San Francisco Bay, and New York Film Academy. So that's just a sense. I covered about almost all of them. I did go back and double check my work. I might have missed one or two when I was writing down the list, but you get a sense. Some of them you've heard of, some of them you haven't, but just because you haven't heard of a school, it doesn't mean it's not a good school. So hopefully this was helpful for you. Go relieve some stress, get some acceptances, get some scholarships, and it'll do a lot to just reduce your stress during the senior year. All right, friends, we're going to transition to what looks like it's the last part of my interview with Uncle Jay, as Julia affectionately refers to him. But as I was going through the interview, and I thought about quite a few questions I wish that I would have asked Jay, because he's such an expert on the SAT, ACT, and there are a few things we never probed. So I'm going to reach out to him this week and just see if he'll do another 30-minute segment. And it'll be more on like how best to prepare for the SAT. It won't be so much on like reasons why he doesn't believe in the ACT or the SAT. But for those who are going to go ahead and prepare, it'll be some more tips. And so I'm hoping to come back with one more segment with Jay. But this one, it feels like it ends because we have, the ceremonial things that we usually do. We put you on the hot seat and we say goodbye. But hopefully Jay will be back with a few more insights. I'm trying to line that up right now.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, Jay and Julie and I, we cover a range of topics, and then Jay goes on the hot seat. And after going on the hot seat, he returns to explaining what it was actually like testifying before the Supreme Court when he was called to testify on the Michigan affirmative action case. Julia shares how Jay has inspired her in a very personal way. And then Jay shares a great story from our own Susan Tree, and I didn't even tell Susan about this. So I know she's going to be in for a surprise, but you're going to learn a lot about Susan and why we love her so much. You have to hear what Jay shares about Susan. Listen and enjoy. What are the ones that concern you the most, Jay? Because obviously, clearly you've made the case that when you look at the cost-benefit analysis or whatever, you don't think the juice isn't worth the squeeze. That's your take overall.
Absolutely. Nowhere near worth the squeeze. Not even close. This is not even a close contest.
I knew Jay was going to come strong when in our pre-meeting. He said, I'm an abolitionist. Strong language. So what do you see as the deleterious consequences of the test?
Well, first of all,
go ahead. I'll just ask it open-endedly. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me start with testing itself. I get accused of being anti-test. I'm not anti-test. I was a high school math teacher. For 2 years, I gave quizzes. I gave tests. I wanted to see what my kids knew. I wanted to see how effective my teaching was. That's what all teachers do in all schools. I'm not giving norm reference tests. I don't care about rank ordering the students. That's just not even really relevant. I care about content. I care about what kids know. Now, that's me as a teacher. So I'm not anti-test. I'm anti-norm reference tests used for high stakes decisions like admissions. That's what I'm against. You want to give an SAT or ACT for college course placement? I think there's some issues with that, but knock yourself out. That's not a high. Actually, some of my colleagues would argue with me on this. I don't consider that generally a high stakes decision of which course you're going to take in college. And there are some disputes about that, particularly around math. So I don't say that cavalierly, and I'm willing to have my mind changed on that. But what I'm saying is, for non-high stakes uses, to measure some kind of content capability, I'm fine with tests. So the problem with the main problem with standardized admissions tests is, in my opinion, the disparities that arise from question selection and the norm reference rank order emphasis of the whole endeavor. And get rid of those tests for all high stakes uses, and the predominant high stakes use these days is admissions. Lower stakes uses for tests, fine. I gave tests for lower stakes uses. So I'm not sure. You might want to rephrase your question. I might have gotten off on a tangent, but I wanted to create a little broader
No, I was just curious if if it was more the misinterpretation of the test results, if it's the bias. I always have this saying, numbers do voodoo on the brain, and the inability of the interpreter to be able to put it into context. Is it the stress and anxiety, that it creates, or is it the opportunity cost, kind of what you said earlier, like you could be doing other things with your, So I was just curious kind of where you were gonna, you might say all of the above,
Yeah, all of the above, but what's driven me since I first became conscious of the disparities in test scores are the racial and ethnic and disparities affecting low-income students. And then later on, I realized and learned about the disparities with students with disabilities, the disparities with rural students, the disparities disfavoring females on math, which people aren't aware of and still exists on all the standardized admissions tests. So Mark, in response to your question, the disparities and the unfairness, and I like to talk about disparities rather than bias, and I'll tell you why. The psychometricians redefine bias in a way that we would not agree with. And so they can say honestly that the SAT is unbiased based on their warped definition of bias. And what they mean by bias, I could get into an explanation. I don't think it's necessary. They mean by bias that the test is out of alignment. It's not a bell curve. If the test is not a bell curve, it's biased. If the test doesn't create a bell curve, it's biased. Like, who would think that? So our rank ordering bell curve has to be done properly, because if you pick a question that messes that up, that's a biased question. You see, their definition is whack. And so I try not to use the word bias. So I focus on disparities and skews, disadvantages to those categories of folks that we've talked about. And then there are all the other things, like you said, the stress and the excessive weight placed on tests. Let me make a reference to Joseph Suarez, a researcher at Wake Forest. Joseph wrote a book that I'm not recalling the title of, but it's a study of Yale's admissions processes over the years. And at one point, he found a statement in the archives about the Yale, and this might be the 1950s or early 60s, that a Yale administrator realized they were having some pressure regarding the scholarship amounts that they were giving, and realized that if they put more emphasis on SAT scores, they'd get wealthier kids, and their scholarship funds would not be threatened in a way that they would otherwise. So there's an explicit example of, well, we're not using income directly. We're using test scores to get at income so we can manage well our scholarship funds. Now, might be a few schools out there, just might, that are doing that today without talking about it. They're just
Without
right.
naming names.
No, not making any accusations. But to see that in writing, Joseph Suarez, who's a friend, told me that changed my attitude toward testing.
Well, Wake Forest has been test
completely.
optional for 18 years now, too.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. He was the one who drove Wake Forest their test optional process.
So we're about to transition out of testing to some lighthearted questions. We call it our hot seat or our lightning round. But before we do, is there anything we haven't said on the testing subject that you wanna share?
Yeah, I just made a note. I wanted to add to my critique of norm reference test. What I was talking about when I was a high school math teacher giving quizzes and tests, those were criterion reference tests. The priority was, what do you know? Not how can I rank order you in my class? And criterion reference tests have some issues, but they're defensible. I don't think norm reference tests are defensible.
Thank you. All right, Jay, here we go. You can have lunch with anybody, alive or deceased. Spend 90 minutes with them. Who you picking and why?
Oh, might be Gandhi.
Oh, and what are you going to talk about with Gandhi?
Well, I was a Vietnam-era conscientious objector reading A.J. Muste, who was an American pacifist. And I realized in later years that his work was based on, he probably mentioned it, but it didn't sink into me. His work was based on Gandhi's sense of ahimsa, which is Hindu term for non-harming, and based his activism, his belief, Gandhi based his belief system and activism on non-harming. And I want to talk to him about that because it's played a pretty significant role in my life.
Cool. Good stuff. And best place you've ever been to for a vacation?
Oh,
give us some ideas here.
Yeah. Well, I discovered Hawaii.
It's a nice place.
And I used to think that people who went back to the same place for vacation year after year, boring. Like, who wants to hang with those folks?
And Hawaii changed your mind.
We're like 16 straight years,
wow.
Christmas in Hawaii.
There you go. Which island do you go to?
Kona.
Cool.
A big island, Kona. I would love to visit Hilo on the other side of the island.
Yeah.
Occasionally we go to Kauai. But those are our go-tos, and I'm a papaya addict as a result.
There you go.
And College Horizons has done a couple of events in Hawaii. I was there,
of course you were there.
eating papaya and talking to the kids. So I've really enjoyed other vacation spots, but I think the evidence supports the evidence for your answer overwhelmingly supports Hawaii, even if I would try to argue otherwise.
What advice would the current Jay give to the 18-year-old Jay, knowing what you know now?
Wow. Pay attention in college, get a better grade point average. Don't get distracted by, those things that distracted us in the late 60s and early 70s when I was in college. I don't have to list them. Don't get distracted by them. Get a better grade point average, and follow your gut, which I've actually done my life, but I would reinforce that to my 18-year-old self.
Unpack that a little more. When you say follow the gut, are you talking about what you decide to pursue for a livelihood, or are you talking about everything from who you date to everything? Like, what is it? Is it general? Or is it more profession related?
Yeah, I think it's general, but I do think of it in terms of occupation also. It's, a decision-making process, as I see it, is gathering a whole bunch of information and then letting your gut really, and you admissions officers, that's what you do as part of your work. I think we all have a gyroscope, that the gyroscope in most cases is good and pure and will lead you in the right direction if you can hear it. Now, I say in most cases, kids who are abused, there are different things going on, but trust your gut in the way that I'm talking about it, and do due diligence, gather information, but then trust your gut.
Last question for you. Is there a book that you have read that's, had an impact on you that you think a lot of our listeners would be well served to read?
Wow. I'll get out of testing.
Sure.
For a moment.
Yeah, it wasn't just supposed to be about testing. It was intended not to be testing. We're off that subject.
There's so many powerful books that I've read in the last several years, from Ibram X. Kendi's stuff, the authors that a lot of people are reading. One that I've read most recently that really was impactful is entitled The Tao of Thomas Aquinas by Matthew Fox, who's a radical priest, and delves into some of the initial problems with Christianity. And I'll just name two, for example. One is original sin, which didn't arise until the 2nd century after Christ. So to associate original sin with Christ is an interpretation that one can choose or not choose, just that a whole church has chosen that interpretation. And another and I'm Jewish, so it's interesting for me to talk about this. And another is Christ on the cross, which wasn't an image until the 4th century. The image prior to that was Christ as shepherd. And just think of the implications of that on religious beliefs of so many people on the planet. So anyone interested in anything like that would like the Tao of Thomas Aquinas.
Thank you. So,
and the book is about Thomas Aquinas, again, written by Matthew Fox.
Thank you. Before we let you go, talk a little bit more about when you were called on in the Supreme Court case, and what was your role, and what was that like? What was that experience like? And tell us some more. I think that our listeners would find that interesting.
I can tell you hours worth of stories about that, but let me hit the top 2 or 3.
Were you nervous?
First of all, oh my. Well, first of all, I was asked to testify for the interveners. Now, it's the classic white student before Harvard, before the Harvard case, of course, which introduced Asian American students as plaintiffs. The classic white student against the University of Michigan Law School. And then there was an intervention by underrepresented minority students whose position was, you have the white student's voice, you have the university's voice. If there's a decision, we're the ones who are going to be affected. We should have a voice in the courtroom. And the court agreed. And so I testified for the interveners. Just want to make clear where I was testifying. And I realized I was going to be cross-examined. I basically was talking about the unfairness and disparities of test question selection. And I had no data. And my first thought was, oh my God, I'm going to be I'm going to have my deposition taken prior to the trial, and I'm going to be questioned about data, and I don't have any. I should go find some. And I found the data, and the data was worse than I anticipated. Like, the situation was worse than I anticipated. So I got this data. Now, remember, I'm in a law school. I'm testifying about the LSAT.
Sure.
But the only data I could get, I tried to get LSAT data, couldn't get it. I did get data on the SAT, and it blew my mind. And I testified about SAT data and disparities and question selection. And I gave examples like what I called the black preference question. Blacks did really well in this question pre-testing. Can't be on the real test. Can't be on a test that's scored because it's going to wreck the bell curve. Or it's not going to wreck the bell curve, but it's not consistent with the bell. That's a biased question. So I testify. So I had data, and just one thing. So my deposition, I could do. This will be the last one. I could do. I think of 10. My deposition was taken by right-wing lawyers. 8 hours, question me up and down and sideways about this stuff. I wanted to take a shower when it was over. I mean, it was such a grotesque experience. At the end, they tried to hit me up for test prep information for their kids.
But I love that story.
They're like, he knows his stuff. Well, I guess that's a compliment. You convinced them you knew your stuff.
And oh man.
The question is, did you say yes?
My brains fell out. I was having a tough enough time keeping my brains in their socket through 8 hours of their really bothersome, it's designed to be an interrogation, really irritating, bothersome question. And then they asked me that. And I'm an affable enough guy. I probably said, your kid should prepare for the test or something.
Sure.
But I wasn't going to say F you at that point.
Sure.
Because I didn't have the brain capacity. So, but the disorientation that caused was classic. I mean, you guys loved it. You gotta love it, even if you're the person who's subject to the unpleasantness. You have to love the irony of it, right?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Jay, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Julia, thank you for setting this up for us, and keep doing what you're doing and speaking truth to power, Jay.
Can I say one thing
Sure,
for our listeners?
Sure.
I think it's probably clear from this interview, but I just really want Jay to know this, and I want others to know this, and I hope you know this, Jay, is that when I met you and you talked about all of these things, like, it was deeply empowering, and it has been so special and really inspiring to see somebody who does have privilege and is educated and is a white man who is really, really in the corner of the most vulnerable. And I think, just like we were talking about Susan Tree earlier, I really can't underestimate the power of somebody who might have a more majority position being able to empower people who are marginalized and really feeling like they have a voice, or they aren't undervalued, or they're not worthless in this college process. So it was really personally powerful for me, and I've seen it on hundreds of students. So I just really thank you for your values and your bravery.
Oh, you're too kind, and that's why I do this work, to try to do the kinds of things that you just talked about. Thank you so much, Julie.
Julia affectionately calls you Uncle Jay, and she doesn't call that to everybody.
The students call, it's like auntie and uncle. So, but Jay is so entrenched in College Horizons, just automatically Uncle Jay. You don't need to earn the uncle status. He just comes in with it.
I'm going to ask you to say, you shared a great Susan story I think our listeners would like. Julia referred to that, but we weren't recording then. So, Jay, why don't you share your great Susan story as one of our co-hosts? I think our listeners will enjoy it.
Sure. Susan has a special place in my panoply of college admissions folks, the many, many hundreds that I've met over the years. And her special place comes from a college board meeting some years ago, and it was the year that Gaston Caperton was hired to become the CEO of the college board. And it was at the college board annual meeting right after he was hired, and he was doing a plenary session with all the people at the conference, a couple thousand people in a very large auditorium. And he was doing a talk, and it was at that time, it was, I believe, Mount Holyoke College that had just decided to be test optional. And Mr. Caperton referred to Smith College going test optional. He might have said he was disappointed or made some kind of remark along those lines. And I'm working from recollection now. So, and then he mentioned that another school, and I think it was the City University of New York, either adopted the SAT as a testing requirement or enhanced it in some way. And he made a remark that was really disparaging, saying something like, well, we might be losing Mount Holyoke, but I'd rather have City University of New York coming in our direction, or something like that. It was tacky and tasteless and well below anyone of his position. And so he talked for another minute or two, it was pretty quickly, and then took questions from the audience. And Susan Tree raised her hand and stood up in the middle of like 1,000 people, a couple of thousand people, and made this beautiful comment about how their colleagues were admissions officers and the personnel at Smith, and they had studied the situation very carefully and determined what their needs were and made a very well-informed decision to go that route, and that she and her colleagues were fully in support of Smith, and that and she continued to talk like that, and it was just this exquisite takedown with finesse and grace that was the diametric opposite of his tacky remark. And she only spoke for 2 minutes or so. It was a short comment. It was exquisite. If there's an audio or video of that, we should get it, because it could be used in rhetoric courses. An exquisite takedown, and then there's silence in the hall. And everybody's wondering, what's Mr. Caperton going to say? And the silence lasted for probably 20 seconds, but it seemed like an eternity. And he said, next question. And I was just astonished, as was everyone else. Everyone was wondering, this is the new guy that was hired to head the college board. It was an unbelievable moment.
Thank you, Susan. We appreciate you. Wanted to let our listeners in on that little story we talked about in our pre-meeting. But thank you, Jay. Thank you, Julia. And look forward to, maybe we can all grab a meal sometime. I'd love that.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Awesome. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Friends, on Thursday's episode, we'll have 2 speak pipe questions. You're going to have to come back to hear which ones they are, but I fly solo on one of them, and one is with Julia. I'll give you those 2 hints. And then we'll have part 2 of the Carlin Green interview on how to win external or outside scholarships. And for our college spotlight, Kevin Newton is back, and we're doing something a little different. We're doing a panoramic view of all your options. If you go to London, England, it's a multi-part series because there's so many schools to cover. But a lot of people, they want that big city like New York. And they like London. London's really attractive, and there's so many options there. So Kevin, over the next multiple weeks, is going to be walking us through your options if you want to go to college in London, England. And friends, remember, hard work beats talent when talent refuses to work hard. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.